Before Rebecca comes up with our first speaker, let me talk to you a little bit about John Caslione. He is a business leader and has been for years, but he is also an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. He has done business in 88 countries and 6 continents around the world, which is pretty close to the full number of continents that we have, as I understand. He has offices in major cities all around the world, and he spends the majority of his time dealing with emerging businesses. So when he talks today, you will know that comes from a long time of experience, not just something that was coming out of a textbook. But speaking of books, he has written 5 books and numerous articles. He has the white paper that's available on your thumb drive. His specialty is globalism strategy. And he works, as I mentioned, in Asia, the Middle East, any place that there's emerging markets. And just in case you think he sits in the United States and writes about it, he came in from Rome last night, and after today at lunch, he will be heading off to Frankfurt on his way to Kuwait to do more work in the emerging business world. So he and Rebecca will now be leading us in a discussion. It'll be a Q&A format. Rebecca will be asking John questions. He will be responding, but you will also have an opportunity to listen and weigh in, as I mentioned, with that text number, and we will have a microphone and things like that. So if I would like to ask you, please welcome John and Rebecca to the stage to come and do the next portion of the program. John and Rebecca.
Okay, John.
Yes,
it's
Rebecca.
Great that you're here. And I think what we're going to have to share with our audience is going to be inspiring for them and challenging for them. So please don't hold back.
Believe me, I won't.
Okay. So you write a lot about the economy, about new markets, and how to be successful, and how to judge what we ought to be evaluating for in the future. And you actually have a kind of a positive perspective, which is unusual because most of what the media bombards us with is pretty depressing, that the future is pretty grim, and how are we going to make money, and our industry is not going to thrive. So what can you tell us that would help us get through the next decade?
Okay. Before I answer the question, I would like to thank all of you for being here this morning. It's an important time in many ways, not only for you and for this industry, for our country. There are certain defining moments in all of our lives and in the lives of our businesses and the lives of our countries. And this is one of those. We are going through a very difficult time. And in fact, we have entered here in the United States, not just here in California, but in the United States, as well as in Europe and much of the developed world, we have entered into the next decade. It's a low-growth decade. And when you start to look at all of the cold, hard facts, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of statistics. That's not what you came to hear. You know the condition of your industry. You know the condition of the economy here. Okay, not only here in California and in the West, but all over the United States. It is inescapable that we have entered into a decade that'll be low growth. The IMF projects for the next 6 years that the average global GDP growth will be somewhere between 4.5% and 5%. At best, the U.S. will be doing somewhere between 2 and 2.5%. At best. So when you start to look at that, and you start to look at a lot of the factors that are out of your control, they are out of your control. When you just look at the debt, we have gone from one crisis to another crisis. The next crisis is the debt crisis. We have, as a country, all of our businesses and all of us as consumers, we have amassed $53 trillion worth of debt. That is 3.6 times, 360% of GDP. The next highest level that we've amassed was in the early 1970s during the height of the Vietnam War, and it was 1.3%. And that's when the economy was $970 billion versus 1.3 trillion that it is today. So when you start to look at the reality the new normality, as we call it. We have to realize that there's going to be no easy solutions. There are no quick fixes to this. Not here in Sacramento, not in any of the state capitals, and certainly not coming out of Washington. So what we are facing now is really time for businesses and the business community to take greater control of their destiny.
Okay, so how many people actually are working outside?
Well, you know what's interesting? I have the results of your survey. Very insightful, very telling. But before I get to this, I want to hear from you. Of 100% of all the companies we have in the United States, anybody have a guess at what percentage of American companies actually sell anything outside of the United States? It doesn't mean that you have an office out of the United States. It means that you export one product or service. Of 100% of all the companies in the United States, what percentage do you think actually sends anything outside of the United States? Anybody? 30? What else? 5, 3, 50. By the way. Whoever said 3 and 5, you're absolutely right. If you average it out, it's 4%. Of all American companies, only 4% actually send anything out of this country. And when it comes to manufacturing, let's just limit it to manufacturing, 15%. More than 80% of our foreign trade is done by less than 1% of all of our companies. When you're going to leave this country, and I believe me, for me, there was day one when we had to do it, and I got to tell you, it was a little bit unnerving, and I made every mistake there was. You know, I admit that I made every mistake there was. Okay, but there are ways to mitigate your risk. One of the things that especially in the service industry, and what we do is service, right? There's actually 2 modes of entry, and one of them is what we call client following, and the other one is market seeking. Client following is exactly what it says. It's how a lot of companies have started. It's how my company started. My companies have started when we did this. We actually sought out global, U.S. companies that were global, and they said, you know what? You've done a great job for us here domestically. Can you do something for us in another part of the world? In good American fashion? Sure. Because they asked the question, can you versus have you ever done? Okay? And so, sure, and then you figure out a way to do it. Because that's what we Americans know how to do. We figure out a way to do it. At least that's what we used to be able to do. Okay? And so just with that, you mitigate a lot of your risk. You're able to control that a bit better. And in fact, when you're doing that, you can actually be a little bit more aggressive when you're doing that. There's a design firm out of Philadelphia, Kling Steubens, and they just opened up an office in Beijing last year. I mean, again, your industry knows how to handle risk. What they did was they hired a woman, a Chinese-American woman. This is all part of a plan. Brought her in, she worked a few years within the company, she learned the company, she learned the company values, the ethos, how the company operates. And then they sent her with a small team over to China. They started to get, and it took a while, started to get one deal, a second deal, and then sending people over. Now after 2 years, they opened up their office in Beijing last year that's going to be handling all of Asia. They're going to be consumed with just China, because they'll eventually going to have to open up an office in India. Okay, so that doesn't have to be terrifying. There are ways to do this. There's another company, it's actually an Irish company, and admittedly, I have to say this, with all the work that we do, and what we do is we will find financing for projects, and we also find the service companies or suppliers for projects. And there's a noticeable lack of U.S. companies. And a lot of it's cultural for us. Europeans are much more comfortable with it because they've got a history of colonization. That's what they've done. Some countries more than others. There's an Irish company, a really cool company, I like them a lot, McNally Design. And they did the same thing that Klink-Stubens did, and they focused on the Middle East. And they just opened up an office earlier this year in the Dubai free zone area, which is airport free zone area, which is between Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And 20 people just focusing on the Middle East. You know who their first clients were? Sheridan and JW Marriott. Because they were doing work for them in Europe. I mean, folks, I don't want to say it's not rocket science, but it's not rocket science. And a lot of the fear that we have is really unfounded.
Okay, so you've talked a little bit about the client following.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds less risky than maybe this.
Oh, yeah, the market seeking. Market seeking is when you're looking for foreign clients. But you say that, though. I've seen companies, it's sort of even in terms of their approaches.
So tell
And
us
you can use a
about the
hybrid.
market seeking. How does that work?
Market seeking is, you know what? There's a ton of business going on in the Gulf and the Middle East. There's a ton of business going on in North Africa. You know what? I'm going to go after those clients. And maybe what I need to do is I need to partner with companies already there. Maybe I need to engage agents or consultants or whatever who can take me there, make the introductions, try to get the first project, break the ice, learn as we go. I've oftentimes said that, experience gives you perspective. Everything else is just information. How many of you have been to China? Okay, for the rest of you, I can talk to you for the next 3 days about China, and you won't get it. You've got to go there. Feel it, sense it, smell it, taste it. The thing is that the things that you take for granted, the things that you don't even consider valuable, you're going to go there. And it's like, it's going to be so darn basic for you. Just the processes, the procedures, how you manage things. Okay? Now you're going to have to sort of modify it a bit at a basic level. And you're going to find that you're going to have a tremendous competitive advantage. The most respected business person in the world is still the American businessman or businesswoman. Hands down. Hands down. They love Italian fashion and lifestyle more than anything. Okay? Excuse me, fashion. But they love American lifestyle and the American business person. And American businesses, despite the fact that we've triggered all this stuff around the world. Okay? So the things that are so basic, you're going to take there. And those are things that they're going to value. And they'll embrace that. Now, your problems will be cultural. Because you're going to go there and you're going to go there with your own paradigms. And we all have them based upon our experiences. And we're going to make judgments. Well, that's wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. It's like, you got to stop that. You got to go there and you got to learn. And if you have the financial wherewithal, you go there. Go to school on a country, on a region. Understand it. Prepare. Okay? And then if you want to, you're going to make a number of visits before you set up an office. I would encourage you to hire people that are from that region that are already here. UCI. How many students are foreign?
Almost 50%.
Almost 50%. How many students are there within the School of Design? And I'd start to do it. Get them while they're young, so you can, affect their thinking, and get them there. And with the plan that, eventually they're going to go home, and they're going to bring us to their home, and you're going to run parallel. And you're starting to do your homework on the markets. You're doing these types of things. Okay. The thing is, the fear is natural, but it's unfounded. It really is.
So one last question. Who does Greg call first? What does he do? He's sitting there going, okay, I'm ready to stick my toe in the water. I could actually start, take a little risk, not a lot. What is his first and second move?
Okay.
And we'll end with this, unless there's some more compelling questions. Greg, did I get that right? Yeah, because
Okay.
I've been watching him.
First of all, and I'm not going to make this personal to just Greg, okay? So it's for all of you. You have to have a real commitment, almost a burn the boats kind of commitment to this. You're either going to do it or you're not. There's no try. And it takes leadership. Now, most of the people in this industry that are either leading businesses or own the businesses are in their 50s, 60s, or sometimes in their 70s. This takes a certain amount of energy. You can't sit back in the very comfortable offices in Newport Beach, Carmel, City of Industry. Why did you laugh?
It's an awful place.
I spent a week there one night.
Yeah.
Sorry. But it's going to take that commitment. And you're going to have to go, and maybe it's going to have to be assigned to the next layer of management that's going to come in that'll have the energy to be able to do this and will want to be able to do this. So the first thing, it's leadership. You've got to make the commitment. There's no do or not do. There's just, no try. There's only do or not do. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, the first phone call you would make, you have to prepare. I would imagine that whether it's Greg or many of you, just the people you know, okay, or the people you know that they know, will know somebody who's doing some business outside of the United States. Okay? You have customers, you have clients that are doing business outside of California, outside of the United States. I would start to socialize the idea. We're thinking about this, we're thinking about that. I would start to talk with your bank, if your bank is a global bank. I would start to look at some selected advisors, because you need to invest in this, to help guide you so you can mitigate your risk. The number one reason why I'm asked to speak, and I don't speak a lot. I don't have a lot of time. I love it. I hope you've enjoyed it, but I don't have a lot of time. When I'm called in, it's like I have presidents and CEOs are saying to me, John, I know we need to globalize. It's all the people in my company that have to support the international business. So I've got these people that are going out there like Hiawatha, the deer slayer, and they're not getting the support from back home. You got to help me convince them, because you lead businesses. You can have an edict, but people don't implement what they don't understand, and people don't implement what they don't agree with. That's just the way it is. And so you're going to have to start to look at your internal organization. And you're going to start to have to bring in people that are from these other countries. And you have to start to build a plan. This is not something you're just going to go and quickly do like this. You'll be doing a number of things parallel. You have to ready your own organization internally to be able to do these things. If you started today, 6 to 12 months from now, you will have your first piece of business, and it may be something very small. If you dedicate yourself to that, I assure you, you will have your first piece of business.
That's new business.
New business in countries that have growth rates that are double and triple more than we have for the foreseeable future. I mentioned to you before, one of the things that we lack, not only in this country but in the world, we lack statesmen. I mean, Ronald Reagan, where are the Ronald Reagans? Where are the Margaret Thatchers of the world? We don't have them anymore. Okay? And Ronald Reagan, son of California, he with a different, at a different time, with a different issue that the United States had to confront. He said, "This is a time for choosing." And I put this to you. It's a challenge. It's a call to action. This is your time for choosing. Whether you're going to engage in what I will say, with no disrespect, magical thinking, that somehow, some way, that despite all that we've gone through and all the facts to the contrary, that somehow, some way, that miraculously the U.S. economy is just going to start to just skyrocket again and business will be there. Or you're going to say, okay, I need to emerge from all of this. And I need to take the difficult decisions, because this is your time for choosing.
John, thank you for the challenge, for inspiring us, for opening a conversation that didn't exist. And I think it'll create good in our industry and for our companies and for our partners. So thank you very much for your wisdom and your insight. I've enjoyed it tremendously, and I hope you have too.
Thank you, everyone.
Great.